Well, it is completely hard to follow that act. We're going to have a conversation about caregiving and emotional support and what's beyond that. Just a real quick quote from Rainn Wilson. If you know The Office, I will freely admit I've actually never seen it, but I know that's what he did. So, and the quote is, "I realize that fostering hope and joy in others is our greatest spiritual calling." And when I was first diagnosed, I have a family, and that was awesome, but I didn't have the resources or know where I was supposed to reach out to find out more about being stage 4 and what I was going through and things like that. And so support was something. I had emotional support from my family, but I didn't have the support of a sisterhood like this that could really help me through what I was going through. It's so important that we create a support network and that we have somebody there for us. So I'd like to introduce Matt and Eve McDavid, and they're going to talk a little bit about her experience and his experience.
Thank you. Hi.
Hey there.
Are we afternoon? Good afternoon.
We are. It is good afternoon.
Official.
But yeah, well, maybe we'll tell us a little bit about, because I don't know if everyone here is familiar with your story.
Yes.
And tell us a little bit about cervical cancer, how it affected you, and then we'll talk a little bit more about that and how it affected you too.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. Hi, everyone. It's so wonderful to see so many familiar faces, and it's just great to be together here in New York. For those of you who might not know me, my name is Eve McDavid. I'm a stage 2B cervical cancer survivor, and I'm Matt's wife. And I now run a company called Mission Driven Tech, and we are modernizing brachytherapy treatment so that it reflects the modern medicine that's already available today and the humane care that both patients deserve and physicians deserve to administer. I had my diagnosis 4 years ago today. Not today, I'm sorry, 4 years ago, though, in January. So I'm right in the thick of that season of anniversary, which is, I think, apropos for Cervical Cancer Awareness Month. And I'm now in remission. I was pregnant at the time, and our beautiful son, Arthur, is now 4 years old. So we have many happy endings to celebrate today.
So cancer is such a crazy thing, and you have to, you are obviously physically going through that, but obviously emotionally, it has to affect you, Matt, and your relationship too with each other. And can you sort of talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. Just for starters, I'm sorry, I get a lot of anxiety with public speaking, but there's nothing I wouldn't do for this cause or Eve. So just going to kind of like look over here.
I'm going to keep eye contact with you. Yeah.
I mean, it opened our eyes. It opened our eyes to what matters, and how we should spend our time, and what our priorities should be, and how we should say what we mean and say it now, and that the time is always now. And so there were big feelings that came about, but I mean, that's what life's about, is being able to give ourselves permission to feel our feelings when they come up. And that was something that I don't think either one of us had allowed ourselves to do much prior to this. But it's something that we really emphasize in what we've come to call our second life now.
That's what I was going to ask, is that when I was going through my treatment, it was very important to me. I told my husband, I said, if no one else is going to be honest, you're the one. You're the one. And so I don't need you to smooth things over. I don't need you to pretend everything's good. If you're freaking out, I need you to tell me that you're freaking out. And did you find that you were initially hiding how you felt, or hiding the severity of things to try and make her feel better?
I absolutely.
And I asked him to. So that was unkind and selfish. And I reckoned with that with Matt afterwards.
And so I guess there's kind of two phases of it. During her treatment itself, prior to her reaching remission, what I just talked about feeling the big feelings, I didn't really allow myself to, or, even Eve to, when she was verbally expressing, I tried to, redirect it towards optimism, towards positivity, like you're going to make it. I wanted to make sure that we were doing everything we possibly could, emotionally and mindset wise, and framing, as that does, have an influence. But we also experienced the consequence of that kind of emotional restriction of the emotional range, after she reached remission, and then it all everything we shoved down, came up.
Yeah. Did you, were you all able to work through that yourselves, or did you receive assistance, like therapy or anything like that? If that's not too personal.
It's not too personal, actually.
Nothing's too personal. Don't worry.
Yeah, and I'm glad you bring this up. So, Matt is a licensed clinical psychotherapist, and he is an excellent mental health professional. And there was a lot that Matt had shared with me through the course of our relationship and our marriage prior to cancer, where Matt was encouraging me to open my eyes to a more fulfilling life, what really, really matters. And I'll tell you, I had, real tunnel vision for a long time until this diagnosis about how I spent my time, with whom, and on what. And one of the first things that happened the day of my diagnosis, Matt was working with a practice in Brooklyn, and I received my diagnosis, and Matt came home from work that day, and he said, I have put my practice on hold, my therapy practice on hold, so that I can be your primary caregiver, and I can spend every minute of this with you. I can take you to your appointments. I can be with you through all of this. And I will tell you very honestly, I didn't understand that decision at the time. I thought, well, won't he want work to help distract him? Won't he want work to have something else he can turn to when this part of us is incredibly hard? And I'll let Matt share more about that, because his philosophy in his choice and how he chooses to spend his time, with whom and on what, really changed the trajectory of our relationship, and ideally what we can hope to share with other couples who are going through this, and what might be the during and then the aftermath of diagnoses like these.
Mm-hmm. I knew it was the most important thing I'd ever do. I mean, we already had a 2-year-old at the time. We then had a new baby, and you were starting cancer treatment. And it just became clear that being your caregiver and our kids' caregiver and doing everything I could to help our family get to the other side, was the most important thing that I would ever do. And I also wanted to make sure that I spent as much time with you if, in fact, you didn't make it. It wasn't just to do everything I could to help you make it. It was that I knew that, how much I would regret it if I looked back, and didn't.
Yeah. Thank you. No, it is a very difficult situation to be in, because, we say, if you're married and you say those vows, till death do us part, I don't want to say they're a throwaway, but you kind of are like, okay, yeah, we'll say that. We'll put that in there. It's not going to happen. Well, you wake up to the reality that it very much can happen. I so appreciate the idea of sort of reevaluating what's important in your life. Carrie Grote, who passed away from brain cancer, she stated, when someone asked her, basically, they said, are you running away from death or running towards life? And that one hit me so hard, because even though I was doing everything I could to live, I still had not made that mental switch about, I really need to evaluate the life that I have and find those everyday glimmers and figure out how to make every single moment count, whether I was dying or not. Because I decided what needed to happen was that I needed to live my legacy, not leave it. It's great that everybody wants to say great things about you when you're gone, but if you have a life and you can live it to the fullest and accomplish your legacy while you're living, how much better could that be?
And Christy, to that point, I just want to mention a concept that I only became aware of recently, but I think it's important to spread awareness of, because if you are aware of it, then it's possible to realize it. And the concept is called post-traumatic growth. Everybody knows PTSD, the more, famous cousin, which is, of course, also true and valid, but equally true and valid is PTG, post-traumatic growth. And the possibility, and the thing about PTG is, though, that it's always possible, but never inevitable. And in order for it to be possible and for it to be realized, you have to know that it's possible. And so I just wanted to make sure to mention it here today.
Absolutely. No, I had never heard of that phrase before. That's wonderful. That's amazing. Anything else you want to add?
Oh, yes, thank you. So I think touching on this concept of post-traumatic growth, it was so important to have this illuminated to me. And Matt, very, very early on in my diagnosis and treatment, raised these concepts to me. And he said, Eve, you are going to look back on this and you're going to have understood what you went through, what it was for, and then what changed afterwards. And I will tell you that I did not take to that very kindly. I remember losing my temper and being very angry and saying, what are you talking about? How could I possibly begin to find the bright spot in this? This is a nightmare. I'm pregnant. Like, how are we going to have this baby? How am I going to get into cancer treatment? And then
and I knew that you would react like that. And I did it anyway, because you have to plant the seed or it's never going to happen.
Exactly. And we had an extraordinary series of events where the diagnosis was a personal and family eruption. And then during treatment, we were in New York City and the pandemic started. And so going to the hospitals in the early days of the pandemic was a terrifying experience. And I want to also mention this because Dr. Balagoon spoke earlier today. Dr. Balagoon, Dr. Chapman Davis, their teams continued treating. And there were other cancer teams that made very, very difficult decisions and delayed or paused care. And that did not happen in our care. And that's one of the reasons I have this extraordinary outcome. It's one of the reasons that I'm sitting here today. And there's the cancer care that you receive at the hospital. And then there's the cancer care that you received at home. And so when the pandemic began, we saw this very existential eruption that was happening at the same time, right? When you have a cancer diagnosis, you immediately think about how much more time do I have and what will be the end of my life. And then you start walking back from there and realizing, okay, everything between now and then is really, really very precious. Mm-hmm. And then you see this global health crisis erupting all around us and you realize, okay, now everyone's in the same position. We don't know who's going to come through this pandemic and what this is going to look like. And it was only then when I could understand Matt's message, which was what we do here matters. How we spend our time here matters. And because of the cancer care I received at home from Matt, I had wisdom and insight into what my life could be after cancer. And without that awakening, I don't think I would have chosen this path. I don't think that I would have chosen to stay in cervical cancer and chosen to now make this commitment to my family and to this mission to eradicate the disease.
And there's just another point I want to make sure to mention about trauma, as it could potentially help other survivors in this room reduce their risk factor going forward for a relapse of cervical cancer, which is, I just want to share this perspective as a clinician. There's a link between trauma and cervical cancer. The studies have shown, particularly childhood trauma and cervical cancer. And the reason for that is that PTSD and unprocessed trauma lowers your immune system. Because your immune system is like fighting the trauma instead of what it should be fighting. And I just want to make sure to raise awareness around that in this forum and setting as well, because it takes such courage to be able to face what happened to you and to move unprocessed trauma to processed trauma. But to help potentially anybody in this room get over the hump to do that, it can help lower a risk factor for a cervical cancer recurrence because of the unique link between trauma and cervical cancer because of the virus of HPV and the link between the immune system and that.
Wow. Thank you so much.
May I say one more thing? Is that all right? Matt, would you talk about the mental health support that you lined up for me at my diagnosis? Because that was another thing that I was prickly about. So I think it'd be really helpful to talk about what support you put in place for me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I lined up a therapist for Eve in the first week after her diagnosis. I also got a therapist for myself, and also other types of holistic wellness treatments as well, like acupuncture and massage and things like that. And I mean, to be able to have a safe space to let it out, whatever the it may be, and to hear yourself say it in therapy, and then to receive validation and support back is so critical. And these other types of holistic healings are as well, because of the mind-body connection and the somatic response of how it can manifest in the body.
I think that's so important that you really attacked the whole, the body, the mind, all of it at one, to really sort of solve that issue that you were having. And thank you so much for talking about that. I know the stigma of mental health is a very big thing. And so I so appreciate that you shared that. I think it's so important to have that proper support, whether it is from your spouse or clinically or another group or whoever it might be, to get you not even just through cancer, but through life. And you guys have obviously such a stronger relationship for it. So I wish you many, many more years of marriage. So
thank you.
thank you.
Thank you.
If we can take a few questions. One right here.
Hi, I'm Julie Grube. Not necessarily a question, but I just wanted to thank you for sharing your story. I was also diagnosed with cervical cancer in January of 2020. And so I went through a similar experience to you. My care, however, was with Dr. Mark Einstein at University Hospital in Newark, which is one of the hardest hit hospitals for COVID. And so I have memories of begging for care and follow-ups after surgery and walking by at that time what were refrigerator trucks for the bodies. And so it was was a traumatic experience on top of also just having cancer. And so I just want to say thank you for sharing and for what you're doing for the cause, and just solidarity for fighting for yourself while the world was as well. So anyway.
Julie, thank you.
You have any more questions?
Can I bring up a topic? Yeah. Okay.
I'm getting there. I'm getting there.
You're here. Hi, my name is Tira Wade.
Hi, Eve. Great to see you.
Good to see you as well. I'm so proud of you, first and foremost. Thank you for everything in this conversation. So, what advice, because you're such big advocates with mental health, someone newly diagnosed, what would you kind of say is like a 1, 2, 3 for somebody to go ahead and get support that we all know as survivors is so crucial with our mental health? What would you kind of give them?
So there's a lot of types of support that someone can receive, family, friends, partner, etc. As a therapist, and also as someone who's been a patient in therapy a lot, there's something unique about the therapeutic relationship and the therapeutic safe space. It's somewhere where like you can uniquely take the filter off that we all have to what's this person going to think about me if I say X, or who are they going to tell, and what is that going to person think about me, etc. And so I really think that counseling and therapy and that safe space to to let it out and put down what you've been carrying is really essential. I mean, as are, of course, other types of support, but there is something really unique about, I mean, with a therapist that you have the right fit with. Let me make sure to say that as well, because if you are meeting with a therapist and you don't feel comfortable being open, honest, and vulnerable, then it's not the right fit. And that's the therapist's job, is to make sure that the client is feeling comfortable being open, honest, and vulnerable. And as in with every relationship in life, some people aren't the right fit, but there is the right fit out there for you. There is a therapist who will be the right fit, who can help you feel open, comfortable being open, honest, and vulnerable. So if the first therapist you meet with doesn't, there are more out there, and please don't give up on the entire institution.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you have another question?
I do. Yes. Okay. There's one other topic I want to talk about, and I know there's going to be a conversation later. I believe it's in today about sexual health and sex after cancer. And this is something that at the very beginning of my diagnosis was a huge question mark for us. I had external beam radiation, and then I also had brachytherapy. And I met with treatment teams around the city to consult for a second opinion. And after I'd learned about brachytherapy and I learned about the outcomes, I asked these physicians, okay, so what will sex be like after cancer? And most of them said to me, you will never have normal sex again. I thought, my goodness, how am I going to tell my husband this?
The male radiation oncologist would say that as like they were like bragging.
Yeah.
Like, the way I do it, you won't.
Yeah, not the way I do it. Exactly. It was horrifying. And you wouldn't talk to a man that way. Another man wouldn't talk to a man that way. And fortunately, the way that Dr. Balagun handled my treatment, it was her intention to treat me in a way that would give me the greatest quality of life outcome and to live as, my idea of being a woman meant afterwards. This was no walk in the park. And it was 2 weeks after brachytherapy where we were indicated to, try to be intimate again, because that helps the healing, that helps the vagina stay open. And that was an enormous challenge for us. And so, Matt, I think it would be really helpful as the partner and to talk a little bit about how, as a caregiver and as a romantic partner, you might advise other men as caregivers to really embrace this sexual health, like new beginning that we must experience after cancer in our relationships.
Absolutely. And I think, I guess, just to start with on this topic, that like physical intimacy is so much more than the patriarchal conditioning around it, that like it's just penetrative intercourse. That's all that it is. Unfortunately, is the masculine conditioning around it. But like, I think that it's just really helpful to redefine that consciously and intentionally, that physical intimacy is so much more than that, and to see it as more than that. If you see it as more than that, it can become more than that, and then that can in turn, lead to, a greater level of comfort, along with, patience and gentleness, and just working together as a team in the new endeavor. Our son Arthur, who's 4 now, that Eve was pregnant with at the time of her diagnosis, we tell him, I tell him all the time that only the strongest men can be gentle, and it's it's incumbent upon the partner to just really like deprogram the conditioning, the masculine conditioning around sex and physical intimacy and what it is, and just to realize that it's possible to redefine that in a conscious and intentional way, and that the goal is to have physical intimacy in a partnership in whatever way that manifests, and also to work as a team in a patient gentle way as well.
Oh,
Thank you so much. Thank you, Eve and Matt McDavid. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.